The house in Los Angeles felt larger at 55 than ever before. Marina Alvarez set 2 mugs on the counter and realized only one was needed. Silence pressed against the windows like a slow, warm tide. Hope flickered, faint as a candle learning to breathe again. She whispered that new beginnings can start in small rooms. She walked through the hallway, palms grazing old family photos. Each frame carried laughter that now lived in other zip codes. Courage, she thought, must be the sound you make when no one answers. She brewed chamomile tea and watched the steam lift like prayers. A purpose waited, soft-footed, at the edge of her thoughts. Outside, jacaranda blossoms freckled the sidewalk with purple. Neighbors laughed to houses down, a reminder that life keeps moving. Resilience, she decided, is learning the rhythm of empty places. She opened the back door and the air smelled like orange peel. The quiet was not a threat, it was a page. She took a notebook from the junk drawer, a fresh blue cover. The first line trembled, then steadied under her hand. What do I love enough to share every day? 5 words landed: craft, cooking, painting, gardens, stories. Her heartbeat synced with the scratch of the pen. A doubt arrived, tidy and persuasive as a bill in the mail. Who would come to learn from a woman starting over at 50? She pressed her palm to the counter and breathed slowly. Life transformation rarely announces itself with trumpets, she remembered. Sometimes it knocks like a neighbor asking for sugar. The kettle clicked off, a small yes from the universe. She poured tea, adding honey, stirring gently clockwise. Courage tastes like sweetness, earned after a long day. She sat by the window, listing what she could teach. The page filled with skills, and the hush felt kinder. Evening slid across the living room like a silk scarf. Lights in the alley blinked on, patient and practical. She wrote one more phrase, careful and bright: create a refuge. A breeze lifted the note as if to carry it forward. Tomorrow, she promised herself, the idea will step into life. Morning arrived with a sky the color of soft denim. Marina tied her gray hair into a steady bun. She walked to the corner market for fresh lemons. A bulletin board bloomed with flyers and hope. One bright card read, Community Craft Fair, Saturday. She traced the edges of the flyer with her eyes. Vendors promised quilts, candles, and gluten-free bread. A small arrow pointed to a map of the block. Resilience warmed her chest like sunlight on tile. Could her home become a place for learning? Back in the kitchen, she squeezed lemons into a glass. The tart scent carried memories of her grandmother's apron. New beginnings often start with familiar flavors, she thought. She imagined women laughing around her long dining table. Flour on fingers, paint drying in afternoon light. A friend, Lila, called to confirm lunch on Friday. I saw a class for beginners, embroidery, Lila said. You always had the gentlest stitch, remember? Marina smiled, feeling purpose ripple through the quiet. Maybe I could host one here, she ventured. On her porch, a sparrow hopped along the railing. She watched it choose a thread for its nest. Courage sometimes looks like picking up one string, she wrote. Workshops for women 50 plus, a brave restart. The words felt honest, needed, and kind. Numbers knocked next, shy but necessary. Tables, chairs, supplies, insurance. The list grew. She circled affordable twice, honoring real lives. Resilience meant designing with care and dignity. She decided to start small and start soon. As the sun lowered, she taped a test sign. Creative Refuge, interest meeting, Sunday at 4. The paper fluttered like a flag of gentle daring. Hope hummed in the rafters, low and steady. Tomorrow, she would map rooms and possibilities. Marina spread graph paper across the dining table. Pencils lined up like tiny soldiers awaiting orders. She measured the living room, then the garage studio. New beginnings enjoy blueprints, she told herself. Purpose sharpens when it meets a plan. The kitchen would host gluten-free baking and teas. The garage could welcome painting and candle making. The patio, with shade sails, fit gardening in pots. The hallway nook could become a photo corner. Each space whispered its quiet potential aloud. She listed workshops with careful, welcoming words: embroidery for calm hands and clear hearts, bread without gluten, warmth without worry, color play, acrylics for everyday joy, garden pockets, herbs on small balconies. A challenge appeared in the price column. Supplies were not shy about their cost. Resilience asked her to think like a neighbor. She added, bring on share materials where possible. Community, she wrote, is a resource to. Progress came as a small, happy click. She created a free email account for a simple form, name, and what sparks your curiosity. Courage is sometimes an inbox, waiting kindly. She pressed save and breathed a grateful breath. She drafted a gentle invitation for Sunday. Come as you are, leave a little braver. No pressure, just possibility and friendly tea. Life transformation begins with one shared table. She pictured faces softening as fears exhaled. Dusk painted the walls with apricot light. Marina stacked the pencils and smoothed the plans. Hope rested on the chair like a folded shawl. She glanced at the empty driveway, imagining footsteps. Tomorrow, she knew, fear would knock, but she would answer. Marina stood in the center of her living room, the afternoon light falling in golden squares across the carpet. The furniture seemed suddenly too heavy, as if it resisted her new dream. She pictured women filling the room, their voices weaving together, and doubt tugged at her chest. What if no one showed up? What if the silence remained louder than before? Her hands traced the edge of a notebook, as though answers might rise from the paper itself. Memories of her first day teaching years ago whispered back to her. She had felt that same nervousness, a storm of uncertainty masked by a smile. Courage had carried her then, thin but steady. Could it return now, after so many quiet years? She walked through the rooms with a slow gaze, imagining their future. The dining table dressed in bowls of flour and sugar, laughter spilling with each kneaded loaf. The garage brightened with colors on canvas, brushes tapping rhythm like small drums. Each corner revealed its secret possibility, urging her forward. The vision was vivid, almost breathing. Still, fear waited at the threshold like an uninvited guest. It reminded her of every past failure, every time she had been told she was too old, too late, too inexperienced. She pressed her palm to her chest, steadying her breath. Resilience, she whispered, as if naming it would summon its strength. The word lingered in the air. To soothe herself, Marina opened the windows wide. The city's sounds drifted in, children playing, a dog barking, the hum of traffic like a restless heartbeat. Life outside did not pause for her hesitation. Hope entered on the breeze, subtle but insistent. It reminded her that beginnings are rarely without trembling. She prepared tea, the ritual, both grounding and familiar. The steam curled into the air like a slow ribbon, carrying the fragrance of chamomile. She imagined offering cups to the women who might come, the warmth bridging the gap between strangers. It felt almost real, enough to quiet her shaking hands. Almost as twilight pressed against the windows, Marina sat at her desk. She wrote in bold letters, "Fear means you are standing at the door of change." Closing the notebook, she leaned back and exhaled. Tomorrow she would find her courage again, and maybe, just maybe, someone else would find hers too. The morning sun spilled through the curtains, lighting up the kitchen tiles in soft gold. Marina brewed coffee and arranged slices of bread on a plate, as though preparing for company that had not yet arrived. Today, she told herself, she would extend her first invitation. Her heart raced with anticipation and nerves beating against her ribs like wings. She called her old friend Leela, who had always carried an easy laugh and a willingness to try new things. Marina's voice quivered at first, but steadied as she spoke about her idea. She explained the workshops, the chance to gather, to learn, to rediscover. There was a pause, a silence that stretched like a held breath. Then Leela said, "I'll be there." Relief flooded her body, warm and unexpected. It was a single yes, but it felt monumental, like the first stone laid in a foundation. Marina smiled at the phone long after the call ended. Hope had grown louder than fear, if only for a moment. She carried that feeling through the house, straightening chairs, clearing shelves, preparing for what might come. By afternoon, she had written small invitations on colorful index cards. She walked through her neighborhood, sliding them into mailboxes and leaving them on cafe bulletin boards. Each card was a seed, fragile yet full of potential. Courage carried her steps, even as her palms grew damp with nerves. She prayed that at least one more person would answer. That evening, she set the dining table with mismatched cups and saucers. She arranged flowers in a jar, their petals glowing softly in the fading light. The house looked different already, less like a quiet container and more like a place ready to embrace life. She lingered in the doorway, imagining laughter echoing across the walls. Yet doubts returned, sharp and persistent. What if they laughed at her idea? What if no one came at all? And she sat waiting alone. She traced her fingers across the rim of a cup, steadying her thoughts. Progress, she reminded herself, was not measured in numbers but in courage shown. And today, courage had spoken first. As the sky darkened, she whispered a quiet prayer, not for success, not for recognition, but for connection. If even one woman left her house a little braver, then the dream would be worth it. With that thought, Marina blew out the candle on the table and trusted the night to hold her hope. Sunday arrived with a clear sky, the kind that promised possibility. Marina moved the furniture carefully, sliding chairs against walls, rolling up the old rug. Each gesture felt ceremonial, as though preparing sacred ground. The house, once filled with echoes of her children, now awaited new voices. A quiet thrill moved through her chest. She draped bright fabrics over tables and set out baskets of yarn, brushes, and notebooks. The aroma of fresh bread drifted from the oven, filling the air with comfort. She placed small handwritten signs, embroidery, painting, baking. Each corner told a story of what could be learned, of what could be shared. The house no longer looked ordinary. By afternoon, sunlight streamed through the windows in golden beams. She lit candles, their soft flames flickering like companions. Every detail carried care, from the folded aprons to the small bowls of lavender placed on the tables. Marina stood in the center of it all, her heart beating with equal parts fear and wonder. Was this truly her home? She thought of the women who might step through her door, women carrying their own doubts, their own quiet battles, women who, like her, longed for a place to begin again. The thought steadied her hands as she adjusted a stack of fabrics. Resilience was no longer just a word, it was built into every corner of this room. Minutes ticked by, each one louder than the last. Marina smoothed her dress and checked the clock again and again. Hope trembled inside her, fragile as a butterfly resting on her palm. Would anyone come? Would this room remain filled only with her dreams? She leaned against the table, holding her breath. Then, a knock echoed at the door, gentle, almost hesitant. Marina's heart leaped, her pulse quickening like a drumbeat. She walked across the room, every step heavy with anticipation. The world seemed to hold still, the air thick with suspense. She opened the door and found Leela smiling, holding a plate of cookies. Tears stung her eyes, though she fought them back with a trembling smile. Behind Lila, two more women approached slowly, clutching the invitations Marina had written. The room, once silent and waiting, now stirred with footsteps, laughter, and promise. Marina welcomed them in, her home finally alive with the sound of beginnings. The living room hummed with a quiet energy as Marina guided her first group of women. Lila settled at the embroidery table, her laughter quick to fill the air. Another woman, Claire, carefully held a needle between her fingers, unsure of her hands. The scent of warm bread drifted from the kitchen, mingling with fresh paint. It felt like the house itself had awakened. Marina moved gently from table to table, offering encouragement. She adjusted stitches, showed how to measure flour, mixed paints until colors bloomed on the palette. Each question asked felt like a bridge forming, connecting strangers into something more. Courage whispered through every small success, steadying both the teacher and the learners. The dream was no longer only hers. One corner of the room held a group of women laughing at their uneven loaves of bread. Another corner carried the soft focus of brushes touching canvas. The house pulsed with new beginnings, each corner alive with possibility. Marina paused for a moment to take it all in, her chest filled with gratitude so wide it hurt. Still, challenges rose like shadows between the light. Some women struggled, frustrated by their clumsy stitches or cracked bread crusts. Marina leaned close, offering gentle words and steady hands. She reminded them that mistakes were not endings but steps forward. The tension in their shoulders softened, and resilience returned to the room. But between the activities, conversations sparked naturally. Women shared stories of children grown, jobs lost, dreams postponed. Marina listened, her heart opening with every confession. She realized this was more than learning crafts. It was about being seen, being heard. The workshops were becoming a safe place for courage to breathe again. As daylight dimmed, the women gathered around the table to taste their bread. The laughter was louder now, the silences more comfortable. Marina lifted her cup of tea, watching the room glow with companionship. She knew these first steps, though small, were the seeds of something lasting. Progress had arrived, fragile, yet undeniable. When the last guest left, Marina stood in the doorway. The scent of lavender and bread lingered in the quiet house. For the first time in years, she did not dread the silence. Instead, she embraced it as a pause between heartbeats. Tomorrow, she thought, the house would sing again. The next Sunday, the house filled with familiar faces and a few new ones. The tables were once again alive with colors, textures, and the rhythm of learning. But something different happened this time. Words began to flow as easily as the stitches and strokes. The women were not only creating with their hands but also with their voices. Claire spoke about losing her job 2 years earlier and how she feared she would never find purpose again. Another woman, Rose, confessed she had spent years caring for her parents and felt lost once they were gone. Each story cracked open like a shell, revealing tenderness and strength. Marina listened, her eyes shining with empathy. The workshops became a tapestry of shared lives, each voice weaving into the next. There were tears, but also bursts of laughter that carried weight away. In the kitchen, 2 women debated the best way to knead dough, their playful argument ending in giggles. The room was alive with more than learning, it pulsed with resilience. Marina noticed how their shoulders eased as the hours passed, how their faces softened with each shared confession. She realized the space was healing them in ways she had not planned but deeply hoped for. These women needed more than skills. They needed belonging. Hope glowed in their voices like embers catching fire. At one point, Lila suggested they gather in a circle before leaving. They shared something they had learned, not just about crafts but about themselves. One woman admitted she felt braver trying embroidery than she had felt in years. Another said the bread she baked was proof she could still create something beautiful. Courage had taken root. Marina closed the circle with gratitude, her voice trembling with emotion. "This house is yours as much as mine," she told them. The women clapped softly, some hugging her before they left. The echoes of their stories lingered in the walls, like music that refused to fade. It was more than she ever dreamed. That night, Marina sat at her desk, pen in hand. She wrote down fragments of the stories, wanting to remember every detail. The words became a mosaic of strength and renewal. She knew these tales would carry the project forward, and quietly, she promised herself to protect this newfound sanctuary. Weeks passed, and the workshops grew into steady rituals. With each Sunday, new women appeared at the door, carrying curiosity and nervous smiles. The house adapted easily, its rooms expanding with warmth and welcome. Marina moved like a conductor, guiding the rhythm of learning and laughter. It felt as though her life had finally found its melody. One afternoon, Claire burst into the room, eyes shining with triumph. She held up a small embroidery hoop with a finished flower. "I sold one just like this at the fair," she announced. The women applauded, their joy rising, as if the victory belonged to them all. Marina's heart swelled. Progress was becoming visible. In the kitchen, Rose shared samples of her gluten-free muffins. The women tasted, nodding with approval and excitement. "You could sell these," one suggested, and Rose's cheeks flushed with pride. It was the first time she believed her skills might carry value beyond her own table. Hope spread across her face like morning light. Even small wins carried enormous weight in the room. A brushstroke that looked just right, a loaf that rose perfectly, a photograph that captured joy. Marina celebrated each step as though it were a milestone. Resilience lived in every attempt, every mistake transformed into a lesson. The women began to stand taller, speak louder, dream bigger. Marina, too, learned along the way. She discovered patience deeper than she had known, and a strength she thought had vanished with age. She realized that teaching was not about perfection but about encouragement. Her voice grew steadier, her presence more confident. She was not only guiding them, they were shaping her to. As the weeks continued, the women began planning beyond the workshops. Some spoke of markets, others of online shops, and a few simply wanted to keep learning. The space had become a launchpad for courage. Marina listened, amazed at how quickly the seeds had sprouted. The dream had outgrown the walls of her house. That evening, as she locked the door, Marina paused to breathe in the cool air. The scent of baked bread and fresh paint clung to her hands. She smiled at the thought of Claire's embroidery and Rose's muffins. These small victories were proof of life transformation in motion. Tomorrow, she thought, even greater victories would come. Marina sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out before her like unwelcome guests. The workshops were thriving, but the expenses whispered a harder truth. Fabric, flour, paints, and brushes did not replenish themselves. Each receipt told her that dreams, however bright, carried a cost. For the first time, she wondered if she could keep going. The numbers were sharp, unforgiving in their clarity. What had started as a labor of love now demanded practical solutions. Marina felt the weight of responsibility for the women who had found joy in her home. Closing the doors was unthinkable, yet so was drowning in debt. She pressed her hands to her face, breathing slowly. That Sunday, she noticed the crowd had grown. More women arrived, eager to learn, their laughter spilling into the yard. Marina welcomed them warmly, but her heart carried the hidden weight of worry. Each new participant filled her with pride, and another calculation of supplies. The room glowed, but her mind chased shadows. After the workshop ended, Lila stayed behind to help clean. She caught Marina staring at the bills tucked in a folder. "You can't do this all alone," Lila said gently. "Ask for help, or let us contribute. This place means too much." Marina hesitated, pride and fear tangling together. Could she risk their trust? That night, Marina walked through the quiet house. She touched the walls, the tables, the chairs that had witnessed transformation. The space had become sacred ground, and she felt a surge of determination. Resilience, she reminded herself, was not only about enduring challenges, but finding solutions. Tomorrow she would search for a way forward. Sleep came slowly, heavy with questions. Would the women still come if she asked them to share costs? Would they see it as a burden or as an investment in their own futures? The doubt lingered, but so did hope. Somewhere between the two, courage whispered for her to act. As dawn approached, Marina returned to her desk. She opened a fresh page in her notebook and wrote one word at the top: sustainability. The ink felt steady, stronger than fear. She would learn how to keep the dream alive, not just for herself, but for everyone who needed it. The following week, Marina attended a community seminar on small businesses. She sat in a folding chair, notebook open, surrounded by people half her age. At first, she felt like an outsider, but soon the speaker's words drew her in. Marketing, budgeting, community outreach, these were tools, not barriers. She began to write furiously. Every note became a new possibility. She could charge small fees, offer package classes, and even organize weekend fairs where the women could sell their creations. The ideas felt overwhelming but also electrifying. Marina realized she was not just building workshops, she was building a movement. Hope filled the pages of her notebook. Back at home, she shared the ideas with Lila and a few others. Their eyes lit up at the thought of selling muffins, embroidery, and handmade candles at local markets. "We can help," Claire said firmly. "We're in this with you." The room filled with a chorus of agreement, courage spoken aloud. Marina's heart swelled with relief. She designed simple flyers, hand-drawn with cheerful colors, creative refuge workshops. Learn, create, transform. Each flyer carried not only information but an invitation to possibility. She pinned them at coffee shops, libraries, and grocery stores. Each tack in the board felt like a promise to herself and to the women. The next workshop began with a new energy. Women arrived, excited, curious about the changes, eager to contribute. Marina explained the plan: small fees to cover costs, shared responsibility for supplies, and opportunities to sell their work. To her surprise, no one resisted. Instead, applause filled the room, sealing the decision with unity. For the first time, Marina felt less like she was holding the weight alone. The women were partners now, not just participants. Together, they were weaving something greater than any of them could have imagined. Resilience had taken root, and it was blossoming. The dream had matured into purpose. That evening, Marina returned home, exhausted but smiling. She placed the seminar notes on her desk, next to her growing stack of bills. This time, the papers did not feel heavy. They felt like challenges she was ready to meet. For the first time in weeks, she slept with peace. News of the workshops began to ripple through the neighborhood like sunlight through leaves. Women told their sisters, daughters, and friends. Soon, Marina's front yard was dotted with cars every Sunday afternoon. The once quiet house now buzzed with voices, footsteps, and anticipation. Hope had spread beyond the walls, reaching lives she had never met. Inside, the rooms overflowed with creativity. The kitchen bustled with the smell of fresh bread and muffins. The garage echoed with laughter as women painted bold strokes across canvases. The living room sang with the steady rhythm of needles pulling thread. It was no longer just Marina's house. It was a sanctuary for courage, Marina watched with awe as women began teaching one another. Claire showed newcomers how to stitch leaves onto fabric. Rose led a group in baking her now famous muffins. Others swapped tips on gardening, photography, and even small business ideas. The workshops had grown into something sustaining, fueled by community spirit. The transformation was visible in more than skills. Faces brightened, voices carried more confidence, and hands moved with newfound certainty. Women who had once arrived hesitant now walked with purpose. The space was no longer about learning crafts. It was about reclaiming identity, rebuilding resilience, and rewriting stories. Local businesses began to notice. A nearby cafe invited the women to display their paintings and sell baked goods on weekends. A florist donated seeds for their gardening workshops. The community leaned in, recognizing the value of what was blooming in Marina's home. Her small idea had become a shared treasure. One Sunday, as the women gathered in the backyard under strings of lights, Marina stood at the edge, watching. She saw them laughing, exchanging phone numbers, already planning projects together. The sight filled her chest with a joy she could barely hold. She realized the workshops no longer depended solely on her, and that was beautiful. That night, as she closed the door, Marina whispered to herself, "We've created more than workshops. We've created a family." The word echoed in the quiet hall, gentle and strong. And in that moment, she knew the dream had not only survived, but grown wings. Tomorrow, it would fly even further. Marina was folding chairs after a long Sunday workshop when her phone buzzed. A local journalist had heard about the gatherings through word of mouth. They wanted to feature her story in the weekend paper. She froze, the weight of disbelief heavy in her chest. Could something born from silence really matter to the world outside? The next morning, the reporter arrived with a notebook and gentle curiosity. Marina guided her through the rooms, still fragrant with bread and lavender. Women arrived early, eager to be part of the photographs. They spoke openly about what the refuge meant: courage rediscovered, skills reborn, hope stitched back into their days. Marina listened, humbled and proud. When the article appeared, the headline read, "A House of Hope for Women Over 50. Marina sat at the kitchen table, the paper trembling in her hands. The words painted her journey in colors brighter than she imagined. Her phone rang endlessly with congratulations. The house filled that Sunday with more women than ever before. Cars lined the street, and neighbors peeked in curiously. The rooms overflowed with chatter, every corner alive. Marina moved through the crowd with AEW, her idea now larger than she had ever dreamed. She caught glimpses of women encouraging newcomers, their voices strong with belonging. The sanctuary had expanded into the community's heart. The recognition brought challenges to supplies ran out quickly, and Marina scrambled to keep order in the joyful chaos. But as she watched women helping each other, passing along threads and flour, her worries softened. The space had outgrown her fears. Resilience thrived in shared responsibility. Late that night, Marina clipped the newspaper article and placed it in her notebook. It rested among sketches and plans, proof that courage had been worth the trembling start. She whispered a quiet thank you to the house, the women, and herself. Life had turned its pages with grace. As she closed her eyes, Marina imagined other women far away reading the article. Perhaps they, too, would find courage to begin. The thought filled her with warmth deeper than pride. This was no longer just her story. It was a movement unfolding, one heart at a time. Weeks after the article, Marina stood in her living room and felt something shift. The workshops were steady now, no longer fragile. The women carried themselves with confidence, guiding newcomers with open hands. She realized she was no longer the center of the story. She had become part of something larger than herself. She watched Claire organize embroidery kits for beginners, her voice steady and sure. Rose taught baking with the ease of a seasoned chef, laughing when flour dusted her hair. Other women had stepped into roles of leaders, proof that the refuge had sparked not just skills but transformation. Marina's eyes brimmed with pride. The true purpose revealed itself in quiet ways. A woman who once sat silent now shared stories freely. Another who had doubted her hands now sold her crafts online. Small victories multiplied into life changes, each one a testament to resilience. Marina realized that what she had built was not workshops, but doorways. During one circle gathering, a newcomer hesitated to speak. Marina reached for her hand, offering a gentle nod. The woman confessed her loneliness, her fear of starting over at fit. The group responded with warmth, voices rising in reassurance. Marina felt the truth settle in her heart. This was what she was meant to do. It was not about crafts, bread, or even the business. It was about creating a place where women could remember their worth, a sanctuary where courage grew and hope returned. The transformation was not just visible in them but in herself. Marina was no longer the woman who feared silence. The space had healed her too. She walked taller, her laughter fuller, her heart no longer heavy with doubt. She saw her reflection in the window one evening and smiled. She had discovered her own resilience while guiding others toward theirs. The purpose had found her as much as she had found it. That night, she closed her notebook with finality. The plans had been fulfilled, but the story was still unfolding. She whispered into the dark room, "This is who I was meant to be." And the house, alive with echoes of joy, seemed to answer back with warmth. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Strings of lights twinkled in Marina's backyard, where tables overflowed with handmade crafts, baked goods, and paintings. It was their first community fair, dreamed of for months, and finally, real. Women greeted neighbors, selling their creations with pride and laughter. Marina moved among them, her heart swelling with each exchange. Claire handed a child a small embroidered flower, her eyes bright with joy. Rose offered muffins to a young couple, their compliments filling her with confidence. Every table told a story of courage reborn. Hope shone in every smile, every sale, every word. Neighbors congratulated Marina, calling her the heart of the movement. She smiled, but deep inside, she knew the truth. The heart belonged to every woman who had dared to show up, to try, to fail, to try again. The refuge was theirs as much as it was hers. Together, they had written a new beginning. As the fair wound down, women gathered under the lights, sharing the day's victories. Some had sold their first creations, others had made new friends, and many had simply felt alive again. Marina listened, her chest aching with gratitude. The silence that once haunted her home was now gone forever. She raised a glass of sparkling cider, her voice steady and full. "To us," she said, "to our courage, our resilience, and our new beginnings." The group cheered, their voices rising into the night sky. For a moment, Marina felt as though the stars themselves leaned closer to listen. Later, as she stood alone on the porch, the lights glowing softly behind her, she reflected on the journey. From an empty house to a sanctuary of transformation, the path had been filled with fear, courage, and endless hope. She had found her purpose, and in doing so, had given others theirs. The night closed gently, carrying laughter into the air. Marina breathed deeply, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The story was not ending, it was only beginning. And as the women left with arms full of creations and hearts full of promise, she knew tomorrow would bring even brighter possibilities.